skeleton as best as possible. And obviously some of the names, so that as we refer to it, you know what I'm talking about for a whole year. So initially it would be the names of things. And to try to help you with that, I brought in some things that might set it in your mind once we talk about it, so that you won't forget it. And I think it's interesting. The derivation of names, for example. Helmet, World War II vintage. The Greek word for helmet is cranion, A-R-A-N-I-O-N. Cranium. The whole portion, which is comprised of a number of different plates that are locked together puzzle-like this. They're called sutures. Suture is Latin for seam, S-E-A-M, between the plates of the cranium. It's that which knits them together so that the plates are not going to separate and fly apart. I'm just going to give you all these different names, and if I have any bit of reality here, I'll show it to you and try to in that way, help it become more familiar to you. Mandere, M-A-N-D-E-R-E, in Latin means to chew, so it's called the mandible. This is a zygomatic arch. Zygoma in Greek means yoke, like an ox yoke. If you look at a skull from above, you see these two shapes that look like a harness for buffalo. Zygomatic, Z-Y-G-O-M-A-T-I-C arch, zygomatic arch. Zygoma, meaning yoke. And then there are wall-like pieces of bone here from the Latin word parias, which means wall. We get our word partition from that. Parietal bones, P-A-R-I-E-T-A-L. Frontal bone, for its name for its position. Cervical spine, coming from the word for neck. Cervical, C-E-R-V-I-C-A-L, spine. There's 7 pieces to it. The word vertebra comes from the word for to turn, vertebra. We have our word in English to divert from one path to another, return from one path to another. Vertebra comes from that. I see you writing all this down. I have a whole handout for you on this.
We received it last week.
But I have a large one. I have a really long one. Yeah. Spina comes from the word for thorn. They stick out. And some of them kind of sharp. Rib comes from the word for vine. It's Anglo-Saxon. Rib, R-E-B-E, vine-like. If you ever drawn a rib cage, you can see what I mean. You follow the path of a rib, ribs only aim down, but then you get lost. You're drawing what you think is a rib, and it's a negative space. You look through here, you see more on the other side, and it is vine-like. Scapula. Here's a scapula from a quadruped. What does it look like to you? How can you use this? As a shovel, a digging tool. They would haft these. In other words, get a stick that had a branch attached and haft it. Perfect. Use that as a digging tool. Scapula means shovel. Our adaptation. Sternum. It has 3 pieces. A handle. Manus means hand in Latin. Manipulate, something you do with your hand. What I'm going through with you now is called nomenclature. The word nomenclature can also be broken down into its components. Nomen means name, clature means breaking apart. When you're studying the name of a thing, you break it apart and try to understand its pieces. Nomenclature. So sternum gladiolus is the full official name for the breastbone. It means sword. It has a wide piece shaped like a blade, and it has a handle. This is called the manubrium, coming from the word manus, meaning hand. That's where I brought this in. And it even has here a little xiphoid process, or xiphoid process. Xiphos in Greek means sword. And this is perfect because it has a little nubbin on the bottom as an analogy for that. Clavicle I have to show you on my drawing board later on. There's some dispute as to where the name came from. Clavus means key in Latin. And if you look at clavicle, it actually comes out and it has a little extension out here, which is this part of the key. But there is a definition in the Latin dictionary that offers a different reference for the word clavicle. I should stop and mention this, that when the study of anatomy really got going, they had to name all of this stuff. And this happened in the late Middle Ages. And what they did was basically name the elements, the skeletal elements, from taking the name from their shape or position or function. Hence shovel, key, thorn, vine, neck, to move, and so on. Pelvis is a Latin word for basin. It has a round shape. It does many things. It supports the contents and protects the contents. On the inside and on the outside, there are various shapes and devices for the appendicular skeleton, of which the leg is a piece, and extensions for the attachment of muscles and so on. The name, if you took this apart, the name of each separate piece would be innominate bone. You take one innominate bone and another innominate bone, and you pitch them together, and you get a basin. Innominate means no name. Because it's such a complex shape, they couldn't decipher anything that it looked like. They didn't know anything that this looked like. Hence, they gave it the bone with no name as its name. The innominate bone. Basin will be a good thing for you to think of in recalling the shape of the pelvis, and also the fact that it's tipped. Actually, in Latin, V is pronounced like a W. Pelvis means basin. This socket is called the acetabulum. It means vinegar cup. Apparently, in antiquity, there were little cups in late Middle Ages that looked something like this socket, hence the name. It still lasts. They call it acetabulum today. Trochanter is the hub of a wheel, where the spokes are rotating around the hub, just as your leg rotates around the hub of a wheel. It's Greek trochanoi, so we get trochanter. So my purpose is that if you make the association, for example, from trochanter to hub of a wheel, then you may remember the name. It'll be useful. You'll be using it every time you draw a figure. What else here? Radius for the character of its movement. This is the coracoid process from the word for crow's beak. It seemed to represent the shape of the beak of a crow to those who were obliged to come up with some names for this stuff. Coracoid process. Michelangelo lived in Rome in the Macello dei Corvi, crow's market. C-O-R is a root for the word crow. It does stick out, actually as partly a defense of the joint, and also it has muscles that attach to it. Acromion process. that's where the name comes from. Ankles. Malleolus, meaning mallet. That too is a little bit difficult to see how this applies to ankles. The ankles are really a bracket like this, like an oarlock, for a foot to fit inside, hinge-like. But apparently, in looking at the leg, there's a central large bone that comes down, and then there's an extension on both sides for ankles. And so the name for ankle persists. Lateral and medial malleolus. Lateral is to the side, outside. That's your outer ankle bone. And medial is your middle ankle bone. Middle ankle bone, the ankle bone toward the center. Medial. There are boat-shaped bones occasionally. There's a pea-shaped bone. Pisum, P-I-S-U-M, means pea in Latin, P-E-A, the vegetable. This is round like that. It's the heel of your hand. The pisiform bone, which this is called, sticks out. It's the heel of your hand. And there are muscles that attach to it, which, when they pull, activate this joint. In through here, there's a boat-shaped bone. It's upside down, but it's like we drew boats as a kid, sort of shaped like that. It's called a navicular bone. There's one that's triangular, like a pyramid, so it's called the triquetrum. This is called the carpus, wrist. Carpus means wrist in Latin. The bones past the carpus, or the wrist, are called metacarpal. Meta means beyond. Metaphysics, beyond physics. Metacarpal are beyond carpal. And fingers are phalanges, meaning soldiers. A flank of soldiers, phalange. Phalanx, meaning a row of soldiers. These two are really interesting. Tibia comes from the word for flute. The tibia, the large bone of your lower leg, was perforated and played. In antiquity, there's a famous painting by Caravaggio at the Metropolitan Museum in New York of a fellow, it's called a musician, and he has on the table in front of him a bone flute, a tibia, in other words. The lesser bone of the lower leg is like the lesser piece of a pin. Like this being the larger piece and this being the smaller piece. And it does hitch back here to the larger piece. Fibula is what I'm talking about. Fibula is Latin for pin. So you have a pin, a flute, a little plate, a basin, a turning thing, a vine, a shovel, a key, an end of a line, a rotating bone, a chewing bone, thorns, and a helmet. And then there are other names which A-R-T-U-S in Latin, and the character of the shape of joints has to be investigated by us in this class. And for example, the shape of the radius as it meets the distal end, the far end of the humerus, is of a shape that will permit rotation this way as this turns against this shape, and it will permit flexion at the same time. This is why you have to come in and look at the skeleton one-on-one on your own. But I made a small model of that. Don't you see that movement is permitted or restricted by the shapes of the bones? If you had a knob like this on the end of a bone, which you do here, and a concave shape fitting against that, that you could do this and that and this at the same time. Which in fact is what happens when you do this and that and rotate, supinate and pronate your hand. It's all due to these shapes. So in order to put the figure into action, you've got to get familiar with the shapes of the joints, or it's all over. We won't get anywhere in here. So you've got to spend a little bit of time with the skeleton. And hopefully, with some of the names, I think it won't be difficult to think of flute. If you think of the large bone of the lower leg as having the name Tibia. Clavicle I want to explain. I just found last year an alternative explanation for clavicle, even though clavis means key. You look it up in the Latin dictionary. I want to draw it out for you. Has anyone here ever been to Israel? Nobody? Excuse me? You have. Have you been to Masada?
No, we go to Masada.
Well, there was a battle that lasted, a siege that lasted for 2.5 years, I think, around this huge rock plateau with Roman forts positioned around this plateau. And what remained of the nation of people from Judea held in this siege around this large plateau by a series of different forts, and it lasted, as I say, for 2.5 years. Well, the construction of some forts looked like this. This is a wall in plan. And I have a book called Air Views of Roman Forts from Antiquity, those that still exist, basically in dry, hot countries, part of the Roman Empire. And a couple of them had this plan. Clearly, if you had a fort that just had a sort of an open gate like that, that would be much more vulnerable to attack than to have a little piece like this protecting this entrance, sort of compressing the entrance. These little curves, as I found out looking at the footnote, are called clavicula. It's like a quarter round. And you take one of those and you hitch another quarter round clavicles together a kind of a bow, as in bow and arrow. With the top view of somebody facing this way, they look like this. They have this curve and they have that curve. Basically 2/4 rounds. And together they make this shape, which is the shape of the clavicle in life. Clavicular. So I think when they say that the clavicle is derived from the word for key, that might be, but to me it looks like 2/4 rounds that echo this element of construction in Roman forts. There are obviously many more names that I've mentioned. I don't want to overburden you with a course in Latin and Greek, but I think it's interesting. Again, just as a rationale for why we're doing all this. There's an upper arm bone. And then here's the ulna. It has a groove at the end. The construction of this is such that it's basically a hinge. So that since it's a hinge, when the muscles are applied, it can flex and extend, or open and close like a door does. The door is hinged. This in turn attaches, is socketed into the scapula. That's the coracoid process. So there are names. Olecranon process is elbow. Scapula, the digging tool. Spine and scapula, it sticks out like a ridge, like the spine of the column is a ridge. Here's the crow's feet. Here's the root of the spine. Here is proximal humerus, that means near. Approximate, to get near something. The proximal part of the construction of the bone is nearer the center line. Distal is more distant. So this would be distal humerus, this would be proximal humerus. And this means elbow, olecranon. We'll talk about all that later. And then here's the radius. The reason that we're talking about the skeleton first is that you have to understand what's going on underneath in order to interpret richly enough what's going on the surface. So let me invest this with musculature, some shapes with which you're familiar. Lightening this. I'll do it in red. Here's deltoid that inserts in a certain place. Here's triceps that attaches to the elbow. We'll talk about its function in another lesson. Here's another head of triceps. shows just here, that's elbow. And in life, when your arm is flexed, as mine is now, there's a part hanging down here below the bone. That's the flexor group, which disappears and is overcut by the bone in this position. I'm hoping that you're familiar with sort of this shape that I'm putting on there with this as a reference underneath. Then there's a series of muscles in through here that come from an extension on the distal humerus. And then there's a cross-cutting muscle that starts way up here on your arm and crosses to the inside of your wrist and starts up here on the bone. So it's our job to talk about this internal stuff, how it works, and also the external stuff and how it works. So since there's so much, we divided the anatomy course into 3 pieces. Anatomy 1, 2, and 3. Okay, I want to show you some slides. Robert, can you go up and just turn those switches off for the light? You can basically blame Leonardo for much of this. It was he who initiated the investigation of the figure for all intents and purposes. Many of the studies of which exist in his notebooks. He had a mechanical ability, an inquisitiveness into the way in which things work. Gears, pulleys, ratio changes, how you get things to move, and so on. How things work. Basically how things work. As a consequence, all this gets translated by him into anatomical drawings, which were done after his dissections, because clearly there's an error here in an early study. The concept is wonderful of muscles that act as ropes. This is a harness of ropes. But the articulation of the way in which the scapula works with the humerus is not well understood here. Clearly, you can't make a beautiful line drawing in ink while you're dissecting somebody. So there were notes that were taken, mental notes taken, and then drawings done after the fact. And if Leonardo had that to look at, he would see how the skeleton, he would see how all this kind of comes together. But the purpose, his purpose, was to give power and authority and understanding to his interpretation of figurative art. Period. So he does many, many studies in preparation for a painting called St. Jerome, which is at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. How does an arm work? What is the function of the pectoral muscle? Where does it start? Where does it go? What does it do? He's not copying bumps and valleys from a model. He knows something about its construction. And that's the purpose of all of these studies that he made. The light is poor, it's hard to see, but they're all a crochet, they're all flayed. We have a whole course in this, Anatomy 2. Pectoral muscle, deltoid, acromion process, clavicle. It's about where a muscle starts, where it goes, what the joint systems can do, and all of this in preparation for one painting that's not even finished in Italy, Florence. On and on and on and on it goes. It's almost too much of a good thing. He finishes all these investigations and never finishes the painting. And even the articulation of joints. That's our mallet, malleolus. Maybe when in the Middle Ages they named this, they were looking at this bone in combination with this coming down as mallet-like. I don't know. The ankles are here, and these are really two bones, not one. how do things work. That's what Leonardo's efforts were directed at in these studies. And then all of this gets translated over the centuries into figures that you may have seen, flayed figures in the French écorché, where the muscle system is made more apparent and clear. But of course, you will not have much success in understanding what's going on here until you're familiar with the joint systems, the skeletal structure underneath all of this. Hinges, rotation, ball and socket joint, gliding joints, rotating joint here, slightly movable joints. Even as you breathe, your ribs are moving against your spine the way in which a handle on a pail moves up and down. So there are all sorts of joints. We'll talk about that next time. Freely movable and fixed and everything in between. There are good references for you today. I mentioned the Rubens book, which is, what, 1495 is a good reference. But there are others, including a book by Elliot Goldfinger, a contemporary, which includes the analysis of what's going on with a photo documentation of each muscle group through the whole figure. Very good, very clear. Everything labeled, good text. That's
$65
Elements of Form, that's the big one. And here, his version of pectoral muscle, I thought I'd show this because we just saw Leonardo. And what goes where, and of course these are all names. We'll talk about these names, but it makes sense to start with this structural stuff. Manubrium of sternum, blade-like, you now know. Clavicle with a double quarter round, cervical or neck, xiphoid process, the vine, rib cage, and knowing something about that, then the way in which these hitch on will make some sense. Good references. And what I have done, and it's great fun to do, and it's not it's less divorced from the whole realm of fine arts. If you're looking at a piece such as this, you can also look at it from the point of view of the anatomical construction, and not just the feeling that you get. It's so powerful and overwhelming. This is an unusual view of this piece. I'm sure you realize that. But for example, at the end of your forearm, the radius is the larger bone and controls the shape of this whole area. At this end of your forearm, the ulna, the other bone of your forearm, is larger. Knowing something about the hand and how it attaches to the radius and not the ulna is expressed so beautifully here. I mean, if you were just copying bumps and valleys, he would never be able to interpret the figure to his own end. This is a powerful interpretation of the figure in fine art, for sure. Magnificent. The exposition of the combination of anatomical structure plus aesthetic sensibility in this hand, to that hand, and so on. So in Rodin, magnificently displayed, you can look at the piece now, both for its anatomical construction and for its aesthetic success. And Thomas Eakins, one of the great anatomists in this country, an informed piece. This is a detail of the painting, a fairly small painting, history painting by Eakins, but it has the anatomical stuff as part of all of his choices. Nuchal ligament, chromion process, scapula, digging tool, the seventh cervical vertebra, which is prominent, elements of the musculature. And so in these classes, just to give you a preview, I'll be doing some drawings, preparing some drawings, and when the time is right, applying the musculature to elements of the skeleton. The long muscles of the back overlapped by the trapezius. For example, the part that is played by the pectoralis minor attaching to the crow's beak bone. Whenever you do this, whenever you reach back, it's not just raising your arm back here, but it's pulling down on this side. You have to reorient the scapula because arm fits the scapula. If you change scapula, you'll rotate the arm. So this muscle tying to the scapula here, this piece of it, when it pulls, it rotates scapula somewhat. The function of this muscle is origins on clavicle and sternum, going to humerus, would be to draw the arm across the torso, but we'll talk about that later. I'm only interested in the bony stuff. So in all these drawings that I do, it'll basically be skeleton first, with the application of bony structure later. I've done many critiques of student work. They give me a drawing and then I hand them back a critique. There are things that we will learn in this class that are really helpful in setting up a figure. It should be obvious to you that where I've outlined this in red, that's the center or median line. Surgeons use that as a point of reference. After all, the torso is bilateral in its construction, so there shall be a center line from which the whole torso is constructed, left and right. And then locating elements of the pelvis. Why the leg starts here is completely a function of design of the whole thing. The iliac crest, the controlling shape of the rib cage, the controlling shape up here of the cranium, the helmet, the head, and so on. And I think I have one other study like this, and then I was so bold as to introduce some of my own stuff here, just to introduce some of my own interpretations and what I'm after in my own work. At least you should know something of that. Again, here is a wonderful reference. You become familiar with the suprasternal notch. We talk about that. The sternum itself, the abdominal wall that gives you the movement of the torso all the way through. It's really important. And something of the pitch of shoulders to determine the position in space for the body. Knowing something about these landmarks enables you to decipher with some clarity what's going on in the model. If you don't know that, then you're just sort of guessing, hit or miss, copying bumps and valleys. Well, so at some risk of showing my work at the same time that I'm showing Leonardo's, let me be honest with you. I think in drawing from life, I'm not thinking of a whole huge inventory of the 19 muscles that attach to the scapula. I'm not thinking that way when I'm drawing from life. But it enables you to interpret, to introduce choices that are relevant to your interpretation of the figure, to know what is going on underneath so that you're not just sort of making a medical text drawing. I think there's a balance of knowing something of what's there and selecting process when you're working on a visual piece. And so again, the 19 muscles of the scapula, I think it would be a mistake to introduce all those, the infraspinatus, supraspinatus, omohyoideus, teres major, teres minor, levator scapulae. I'm not thinking that way when I'm drawing a section. I'm thinking of modeling the form the way sculpture would model the form. And yes, knowing something about where something goes or what muscle cuts in front of what is extremely important. By the way, words, shading and modeling. We like modeling as a descriptive word that means representing the form rather than shading. Shading seems to give too much emphasis to the shadow side and not enough to the light side. So we would say modeling the form and not shading it. And then after trips to Egypt, I really got hooked on the peasants that work the fields. And I have a life-size mannequin in my studio that I can dress in order to work on the drapery. So I bought some clothing over there that are worn by Egyptian peasants. And I often use my own arms and hands as a reference. Never photographs, although I might, but I haven't yet for some of these things, and these are all life-size. So it gives me a chance to work from life, using some of the anatomy, some of the drapery. It's so much fun, and the drawing that I like to do as against the use of color right now. Somehow or other, all my paints are just collecting dust. I'm happy enough with just the charcoal. But knowing something of what this arm is doing, this joint is immobilized. Left arm, it's immobilized. So holding on to carrying a big bag or something, it's immobilized. To immobilize this joint, you have to pull on one side as much as you pull on the other side and hold this rigid. So both triceps and biceps muscles would be working on this. Again, how much would I think of it clinically? Not much. How much attention is given to the shapes? Plenty. But put it this way, consider the alternative. If you don't know what this is doing and where it goes, and you don't know what this is doing and where it goes, then you are condemned to just copying what you see. You can't interpret what you see. A few others. They're great subjects, wonderful. They almost look biblical, very simple. People tied to the earth doing simple things. There's no, excuse me? Male. I pose to the arm. Answer is male. Hands, knowing something about wrist and a combination of that and so on is useful. So, to be honest with you, to get back to that point, I think anatomy is maybe 20% of it or less, but it's just that if you don't know something about it, and the slide is not good, it's a life-size back, drawing of the back. If you don't know what to look for, you might not see it or misinterpret it, and that would represent a flaw in your interpretation. Okay. I want to stop there. I think next time, we're at 10 minutes of, and I've had it with this pounding over here. Next time we have to get into the joint system some and begin to put this to work. Don't be too afraid of all of this. Don't be put off by this. It's too much science, too much Latin, too much Greek. It's my job to try to